Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to start by briefly introducing yourself and why you're running?
So I'm Kat Abughazaleh. I'm running for Congress in the Ninth District of Illinois. I am a researcher and journalist who covers the far right. My work helped get Tucker Carlson fired from Fox News, got me deposed by Elon Musk, and most recently, I've been indicted by the federal government for protesting ICE, which was less of a surprise than it could have been, considering all of the loser right-wingers I used to cover now run the country. I also wanted to run for office because I felt an urgency in this moment. That's why I was the first candidate to jump into this race. I didn't want to wait in line or ask for permission. I thought I could make a genuine change in how Democrats approach fascism based on my own work, and I wanted to make that change. I also am unapologetically progressive. I support the idea that everyone deserves to afford housing, groceries, and healthcare with money left over to save and spend, and we can't compromise on those basic human rights. We need to be able to communicate these ideas better, and we need to not flinch when we talk about them. We mention affordability. It's not a buzzword. It's a plan, and that plan needs to be expansive. No more incrementalism, no more piecemeal approaches. Finally, I also thought we could do politics differently. We use our resources in our campaign to help people right now. We feed and clothe people. Our office doubles as a mutual aid hub, and our events are accessible to everyone, no matter their income. We don't do call time. Instead, we live stream, which has been a really great ethical grassroots way to both have town halls and raise money. Additionally, we try to be as transparent and as interactive with the community as possible, especially when it comes to primaries. So many voters are left out. So we're trying to reach everyone because we think everyone deserves to be represented.
Yeah, this is the first open competitive primary for the Ninth District in over a quarter century. You know, it's been continuously represented by Jan Shakowski that entire time. You mentioned you were the first one to jump into the race before she had announced her retirement. Looking at her tenure and her legacy, what lessons do you think that you might take away from Shakowski and her time in Congress? And then on the flip side, how do you think you might serve in the office differently, whether it's from a policy or an approach perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I very much respect Representative Shakowski, especially as a Palestinian American. I mean, she was ahead of the curve of many members of Congress when it came to Palestinian rights. In 2015, she boycotted Netanyahu's speech. That was not a common occurrence then. I think specifically one thing that I want to carry on is her impeccable constituent services. This office is known as one of the best in constituent services in the country. We also want to not only keep on staff that want to stay on to make sure there's that continuity, but also make constituent services even more accessible by including a chat feature, by using some of the funds for it for a public service campaign, and by working with mutual aid and direct action organizations on the ground to ensure that we are meeting people's material needs as soon as possible. These are really unprecedented times, and we have to make sure that we can reach as many folks as we can. As far as what I would do differently, especially in the last few years, I would have voted differently, specifically regarding foreign policy with aid to Israel and the genocide in Gaza. To be very clear, I will not be voting for military aid to Israel as long as we are not following our own laws. If you're a member of Congress, this is a really big responsibility, and there's a lot of pressure, and I get that. But for me, this is a non-negotiable.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Constituent Services Office wanting to keep that continuation. Is there any approach that you would take as far as like being present in the district, not only on the Hill, but locally kind of being available to people?
Yeah, because this district goes from uptown Chicago all the way to Crystal Lake, we'd want to make sure that there's at least one field office in the farther out parts of the district, the farther west parts of the district. Additionally, and this might sound silly, I'm keeping my cat in Chicago. People have asked, how can you expect to come back to the district? And I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, but I want to do it right for the time that I am in Congress. And that means coming back to the district as often as possible. I think that a lot of people in Congress, it's not that all of them necessarily don't want to do the job well, but it's really hard. It's hard to represent this many people, especially with the House that the number is. So making a real concerted effort for the time that I'm in Congress to consistently be coming back and to be able to promise at least a town hall a month and to be able to use our resources in the way we do on the campaign side during that tenure is really important to me.
You've mentioned throughout the campaign that this is you're running right now because of the current moment. And as you just said, you're not planning to stay in the office for forever or even a long time. Is there any kind of gauge in your mind of how long that you might be willing to stay in Congress if you win, how long you would want to, or is that kind of, gazing into the future too much?
Oh, I've said that I wouldn't serve more than 5 terms, and I want to be really clear about that because if I try to go back on that promise, I'll look like an asshole, so I say it a lot. But I didn't plan on running for Congress at all last year. I made the decision actually a year ago today when we're filming this, February 3rd, and I don't even remember what the tipping point was where I just said, "Screw it. I'm done waiting around for someone to show what I wanna see in our party." Um, but something did push me, and it might have been, all the Democrats sitting behind Trump. It might have been the consistent ignoring of me and my colleagues when we're warning them about January 6th, warning the Democrats about January 6th, about where the DEI, CRT, anti-trans panic would lead. But I wanna get in, help people, and get some fascists out, and then go back home to hanging out with the aforementioned Kat, who, for anyone watching, her name is Heater with an H, and she's delightful.
Yeah, the Ninth District is historically very progressive, and the Democratic field that you're running with and against kind of reflects this. There isn't much immediately clear difference on policy between you and a lot of the other frontrunners. What is a policy position that you hold that you think separates you out? Like, whether it's as an example or just like a big one, what can make you a little different from everyone on the policy angle?
Yeah, so first off, I would say from the clear front runners of the top 3 polling people, myself, Mayor Biss, and Senator Fine, I think that my foreign policy is differentiates me, especially. I don't support anti-BDS legislation. I don't support arming Israel without following our own laws. And I am of the belief that we need to not just have Palestinian statehood, not just recognize Palestinian statehood to get to any solution, but we need to have an ambassador in Palestine and one here as well. It's also necessary that the United States pays reparations to rebuild Gaza because the destruction was done with our own tax dollars. As far as the field in general, I think that one thing that I've been very vocal about that I am uniquely positioned for is I want to spearhead AI regulation. There are 0 federal regulations for AI. And as someone that focused on extremism and disinformation, AI has been kind of a nuclear bomb in that space. We can't just pass the No Fakes Act, which also needs to happen, but we also need to make sure that the Make Polluters Pay movement also applies to data centers. We need to ensure that these essentially plagiarism machines aren't ruining our communities and that these companies are forced to pay reparations to the communities that they've harmed, which are historically Black and Brown communities. At the same time, we can't be infringing on free speech with laws that are said to protect children but require you to put your ID and face into any website just to access it. AI regulation is something that even Republicans feel strongly about. It was one of the only things that didn't get through Trump's big, beautiful bill when he said that states couldn't regulate AI for 10 years. And even Republicans were like, that's crazy. So that's one thing I want to spearhead.
You mentioned this earlier, but as a member of Congress, you'd be one out of 435 people in the House of Representatives, and as a freshman congressperson, may not immediately have much, like, call it leverage or call it experience, understanding of Congress to kind of immediately come in and advance a policy agenda. So as you're entering your first term, what would be your top priorities of things that you feel you could push really hard on and make progress on in those first 2 years?
I think that we don't think big enough on this. I would say for bipartisan legislation, first off, AI regulation, also including legislation that requires companies to ask users to opt in to their data being used to train large language models, kind of like when your phone asks if you accept cookies, as well as limiting CBP's jurisdiction to 5 or 10 miles rather than 100 from any international border, which also includes Lake Michigan, by the way. And so really ensuring that I think as more and more red communities are also hit by ICE under the guise of small government, this is something that we could work with certain Republicans on, especially if we have the majority in the House. But I also think that we don't think big enough when it comes to being a freshman congressperson. Cori Bush slept on the steps of the Capitol and was able to reverse President Biden's decision on the eviction moratorium. She was a freshman member of Congress. We as a party, as a country, have forgotten the power that people in power actually have, if that makes sense. There is not enough use of power and platform and privilege. And if you are a member of Congress, you are one of the most powerful people in the world. When Elon Musk marched his army of, teenagers to the Treasury Department, every single member of Congress should have been arm in arm in front of every entrance and every exit and called his bluff, because fascists are weak and you need to call them out or cause a national scandal. When it comes to, voting for DHS funding, those 7 Democrats who did that, we need to have Democrats that are willing to speak out against them. They should be excommunicated from the party. They should be primaried with party resources behind their challengers. And this unwillingness to engage in competitive primaries is part of the problem. So I've actually spoken to members of Congress where they ask what I can bring to the table. And I said, you can use me as a scapegoat to bring these progressive policies forward. I will be the person to help break quorum or call a point of order every 30 seconds. It's not polite, but people are getting executed in the streets and we don't have time. This is not training. This is not practice. We're here right now.
Mm-hmm. And do you think part of that ability to, as you said, be a scapegoat and put yourself out there, part of that is you yourself bringing the energy? Do you think that that's also partially able to be done because of the 9th District being as progressive, deep blue as it is? We can point out the fact that whoever is the Democratic nominee is very likely to be the next congressperson, virtually certain. Does that kind of factor into your thinking here and the strategy?
I mean, a lot of our campaign is experimental, and my time in Congress, I want to be the same. And I'm going to try this crazy thing where I do my job instead of trying to get reelected all the time. Frankly, it's the same reason that I asked people if they need help filing out the FEC paperwork, that I'd help them do it, because I believe in that competition. I believe in democracy, and that's what democracy is. If I do a good job, I get reelected. If I don't, then I don't. And I think that's part of yes, it is helpful in a deep blue Democratic district if we're worried about reelection, but more than that, it means that we can have these conversations in a way that we haven't in other districts. We're able to pick of a bunch of, relatively progressive candidates rather than just, 2 or 3 people that may have a milquetoast approach.
And you think that strategy is going to depend a little bit on whether outside of this district, Democrats take the House back in general with the midterms? How do you see that changing the game a lot as far as, Senate may not be very likely, but...
After we win in March, I will be using my resources to help elect as many progressives as possible across the country. If we can win a majority of that majority of people that actually want to do something, then we have the leverage to push the party to the left, or what I consider the center. And that's what we need to see.
So you wrote in your questionnaire response for the RoundTable that you're the best candidate for the seat because you are, quote, already doing the work that this moment demands. And you go on to refer to your work at Media Matters and elsewhere reporting on the far right. You're running against, for the most part, with the leading candidates, a field that are already in elected office at various levels. So what do you think about your work, with Media Matters and other spaces makes you uniquely qualified to serve as a representative, as opposed to that kind of, call it, quote unquote, more traditional path of going through other elected offices?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'd say if the more traditional path, if being a career politician was the answer, then we wouldn't be in this position in the first place, because that's pretty much been the approach of most of our politics for the last few decades. Additionally, Illinois does so many things correctly, which is why a lot of people move here, but it's also why our leaders haven't had to deal with people like Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and Dan Bongino on a regular basis. I have. One of the issues we've seen in the Democratic Party over and over again is taking bad faith arguments in good faith, or not fully understanding what effective resistance to fascism looks like. This is what my education and my career is devoted to. And I think that it's been clear in how the right has responded, not just to my candidacy or to my activism, but over my career, being deposed by Elon Musk, the attacks that Fox News has levied against us, the hate campaigns and doxing campaigns that I and my colleagues have dealt with. If you still think that there is something that this moment, you can say this moment is different, but you have to actually act like it. And that means taking action. That means delivering for people right now, like we do with our mutual aid work. That means being able to effectively utilize your platform to steer conversations and to push people to the left. And I don't see that in a lot of career politicians across the country.
You think that if you were elected, that kind of experience you could bring into Congress? You mentioned trying to seek membership on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, like working with your Democratic colleagues in Congress. Do you expect that will translate with them to, okay, we should work with her, we should try to, get her into these positions? Or do you expect any resistance from, the rest of the party in other parts of the country if you were to be elected?
I mean, we've seen resistance from the establishment throughout our campaign, and that's okay. It's the old world is dying, the new one's struggling to be born. Um, but I am always happy to negotiate, to talk about things in private. I was a union rep. I helped negotiate our contract from 42K to 54K for our base pay. I'm happy to have those conversations, but at a certain point, we have to realize that if those conversations aren't leading anywhere, or if we're still trying the same things over and over and over again, and you're just being heard to placate you or your voters, then we're not going to make any progress. And fascists are playing a rigged game. We can't expect them to still be operating like it's 2012.
So throughout the campaign, another thing that has come up from opponents and other critics is that you did first move to Chicago and into the district fairly recently, within the last couple of years. Some have leveled that you may not have enough knowledge of the district or connection to it to properly represent it in Congress. Why do you feel at this point equipped to run and represent this district in Washington? And, how much should a candidate's tenure in an area and connection to it matter for its representation?
Yes, this is a really good question. First off, I decided to run to throw my hat into the ring because of the experience that I have fighting the right, and because I don't see anyone in DC who seems to fully understand, especially in leadership, fully understand how the right functions in a way that the people of Chicago and Evanston and the Chicago area do. We are carrying the water for so many representatives of so many states that refuse to actually recognize the threat that we're under. Like, we have been the ones on the streets while our representatives, and I don't just mean in Illinois, but in DC in general, have been voting for more body cameras. I think we need people to understand how to communicate and how to fight the right. And that's why I decided to run. As far as this specific area, I could have launched this campaign talking about my family background in Chicago. I could have mentioned that this is where my family immigrated. This is where my dad learned English. This is where my parents got engaged on Lake Michigan. But I don't want people to vote for me based on where my daddy learned English. Even though Chicago has been a very important and special part of my life, I want people to vote for me for my values. And also, as so many people come here as refugees in our own country for queer rights, for reproductive rights, for immigrant rights, as climate refugees, if they think they can make a positive change too, then they should. I don't want to play into this idea that they shouldn't be able to be a part of that conversation either. And this is a primary. This is what this is for. If these are not the qualifications voters are looking for, then that's fine. That's democracy. But I think that we need to really think about how we're talking about the idea of a city of transplants and immigrants, and one that has been so welcoming to so many, and trying to frame it as, in the political mind, as some sort of insiders club.
You may not have grown up here, but have you encountered on the trail, talking to voters, talking to people, any pushback on like, well, you haven't been here that long, you don't know the district, like you have a familial connection, but how do you feel you have or been trying to build trust with people that, like, yes, this is where I want to be, like I'm going to do what's right for the district and I know it well enough to know how to do that?
Yeah, I always encourage skepticism, and I say, don't listen to what I say, watch what I do. I think that it's important to be skeptical of anyone asking for power, and running for office inherently is asking for power. there have been a lot of folks that, when I first ran, considered me kind of a joke, and then they've seen us in the community helping people right now. I mean, we're building a bike shelter at ETHS for our student grant program that was won this summer. We're feeding people, we're clothing people, we're ensuring that we are everywhere. We're trying to be as accessible as possible in a time where a lot of politicians just aren't, whether they're going to, APAC fundraisers constantly, or whether it just seems like you can't see them. We're trying to make sure that we are there. So we try to show through our actions rather than our words, and I think it's come through to a lot of voters.
Back when you first launched your campaign, at your launch event, you and I spoke, and kind of asked you along a similar line, like, well, why this district? Why now? You said this wasn't a referendum on, excuse me, you said this wasn't a referendum on Shakowski, and that this district, the 9th district, is one of the best, quote, for a campaign like this one to be received, because of its progressiveness, and because of other factors. But can you kind of speak more to, like, as the campaign has gone on, how has your campaign been received by people in the community? You just spoke about the grant program being out, with the mutual aid hub / campaign HQ. How have people responded to that? Have you gotten any pushback? Has it been mostly positive?
Mostly positive, and there are some people that just don't like us, and that's fine. And uh, to be clear, that whole night was kind of a blur. The whole first week of the campaign was crazy. But I've had people ask, why did you choose the 9th district? And I wish I had like some sexy answer, but it's because Ben and I wanted to live in like Rogers Park or Andersonville. And now we live in Rogers Park, as we found out we're neighbors. But it is one of the most progressive districts in the country and one of the most diverse districts in the country. And we have an opportunity to be able to show others how campaigns can be run. And the response has been so many people joining this movement. The other day we had office hours where we accidentally took over like all of Nabila Cafe, and one of the people there was contacted via phone bank, and then the person who had called him on the phone bank was also at office hours, and then they went out canvassing together, and the person that had been contacted has never canvassed before. We have every single day people come to our office to drop off clothes. Every single day we're launching new door knocking events or business canvasses all over the district. It's the reception, I think, has just been momentum and energy, and it's really exciting.
So switching gears for a moment, you know, going to a variety of forums, there was one recently that you had missed out on with Indivisible Edgewater. You later explained in a statement that it was due to a sleep attack with narcolepsy. Can you kind of provide a response or comment for voters who may be concerned about how that would impact your ability to do your job in Congress, or kind of what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I think my explanation is, for those who don't know, I have narcolepsy. I've been very open about it for my entire adult life. I was diagnosed when I was 18. I try to be really open about my disability because half of America at least has a chronic illness of some sort. And we have atrocious disability rights in Congress, and we don't have a diversity of backgrounds, not just religiously, racially, ethnically, or by gender, but also in income, in industry, and then also in disability. Um, I think it's one of these narcolepsy specifically is almost used as a punchline in a lot of shows or movies. And it's a chronic illness like any sort. And I had people accuse me of hiding it. And I think it just shows, just like so many others with chronic illness, that everyone has their own management skills. And for this entire campaign, my management skills have been great, but just like also anyone with disability or chronic illness, which people will have at some time in their life or another, their flare-ups. Um, I can always promise to be transparent. I had people actually ask, they were like, you should have lied about this. And that seemed like a interesting take when there's so much dishonesty in politics. Um, but I'm not ashamed of who I am. And I think that if we treated disability with the openness of anything else in our lives, we'd be in a much better society in general.
Wrapping up, this week, 9th District voters will start receiving their mail ballots. Early voting is going to open, I believe, in McHenry and Lake County, and soon in Cook County. As voters are starting to make up their minds, send in their ballots, and vote in this primary, what is the one thing that you want them to keep in mind?
A lot of the candidates in this race, we will vote similarly on a lot of issues. And once again, we are blessed to have such a progressive district. But the thing that will differentiate us is how we handle this current moment. I think when I say I care about people watching what I do rather than listening to what I say, I mean it. And I hope that my actions and the actions of our campaign have shown people how we lead right now. Pushing my opponents to the left in their positions and to be more aggressive against this administration, showing what tangible resistance and distaste for ICE, not distaste, horror for ICE looks like, and how to support a community through actions rather than words. I can promise that I'll always tell the truth, even if people tell me not to. And if you want to know who scares this administration most, look at what the people in this administration are saying about us. And I've got court later this week.
All right. Well, thank you for making time for us today.
Thanks, Alex.